Have you ever noticed how the word faith only shows up at the end of arguments for God? You'll hear God exists because the universe had to come from somewhere, because morality needs a source, because miracles do happen. And when each of those arguments crumble, you'll hear the infamous phrase, well, you just have to have faith. Faith is the last dying gasp of a sputtering, bad argument, the emergency exit when reason catches fire. It's like running out of ammo in a debate and throwing the empty gun as your final weapon. Faith doesn't explain God. It's an admission that you've got no actual evidence for your God. And if the best you can do is tell us to believe in things without evidence, then you've lost the argument. But congratulations, you did win a consolation prize, a gold medal in mental gymnastics. So get your leotard ready. Today's your day. The lines are open and the show starts now. Welcome, friends. Today is September 14th, 2025. I'm your host, Justin. You might know me elsewhere as Deconstruction Zone, and I'm joined by the fabulous Jim Barrows. Great to see you, friend.
Yeah, great to see you too. Second time in a row almost. And I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, we were able to do it twice in a month. That's exciting.
Yeah. And hopefully, this week we get some callers who can actually answer yes or no questions. And when they say the Bible says something, can give us chapter and verse. But I don't hold out for that level of competence today. So we'll see how it goes, though.
It is impressive because we're told that faith can move mountains and that they'll be able to do anything through Christ. But it's weird that the simplest things they can't do, like just say yes or no to an easy question. But we'll see what happens.
Yeah. And anything except, regrow limbs, fix eyes. I still wear glasses, although I don't wear them when I'm sitting in front of a computer. None of these things seem to be fixed, right? Except by charlatans and proven charlatans who can do that. So where is all that?
But Jim, your eyes have been finely tuned for those glasses. You just don't understand.
I'd say my glasses, well, they're not so finely tuned anymore. I needed a new prescription, but I think it's the other way around. But I could be wrong. We could all be wrong about this. The human body could be finely designed, even though the spinal cord is a complete disaster. It doesn't have the proper support for a vertical column that it should. Why are our ribs so high up, given that almost all predators are shorter than us, leaving our stomach wide open and unprotected? It's almost like we were designed to maybe walk on all fours at some point, and our bodies just haven't adapted. You would think. But yeah, otherwise we're perfectly designed, right? That's why we catch colds.
Of course. Yeah.
Right.
And then the same virus DNA gets itself into our genome and we have thousands of endogenous retroviruses.
Yeah, exactly. Including just one that, separates us from chimpanzees. But yeah, honestly, if I as a software engineer, you're a software engineer too, right? Or just
So I was an electrical engineer for about 20 years, but I probably spent more of my time programming software than anything else.
Yeah. If you or I wrote software the way DNA is written, we'd be fired. And because it's just craptastic. You don't need that many error mechanisms if you write good code in the first place.
100%. And the amount of dead code that is code in quotations that's in our body is preposterous. If you had that amount of dead code in your program, they'd fire you and hire an intern to do it for you. That's crazy.
Yeah. The same with like being a double E, right? Could you imagine, designing a chip or some electrical component with a bunch of stuff that just doesn't work for no reason?
It worked 30 iterations ago that we copied it from, but don't worry, it's fine. It's the top notch.
Right. Or copy errors. How many times a day do we copy a file from one place to the other? And if we had the error mechanisms or the error rate that our DNA has, we'd get nothing copied, right? Just moving from place to place. Yeah.
Indeed.
These streams are copied. So guess what? The streams wouldn't work that well. So where is all this, perfect engineering that's supposed to be done. Because if God exists, he needs to have his engineering license revoked.
Jim, you just have to have faith. Remember, just have to have faith.
I have faith that if God actually did the things that he is claimed of him in terms of engineering, that the world would be much, much worse.
Yeah, I have to agree. If the God like that's described in like the Bible or the Quran and whatnot, if that God really did design some stuff, honestly, it seems like it might be worse than what we have here. Like if there was a God that designed this environment, it's got to be some sort of a theistic God, not in one of these books, because the God in one of these books is horrific. These are not good books.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, he can't even get how to motivate humans right, because according to psychology, the worst thing you can do is delay reward or punishment. And the next worst thing is delayed punishment. That is the worst motivator, is delayed punishment. And yet that's all God really has. So, what happens to internal motivation, which is the best way to motivate somebody to do what you want? None of that appears in the Bible. It's all heaven later, manna later, this, whatever. It's never anything now, which would work, or nothing but punishment reward, which is not nearly as effective as finding ways to internally motivate people. You'd think if he made us, he would know that.
Well, he's just beyond our understanding. We don't get him. It's okay.
Oh yeah. So basically the ends justify the means. Is that kind of where we're at? Yeah. Oh wait, no, that's not moral.
Well, we've got a couple people in the queue. It looks like either mostly atheists so far. If you're a theist and you want us to know about your God, or you want to prove us wrong and tell us why indeed your God is real and atheists are silly, call the number on the screen. We'd love to hear from you. And with that, let me read the introduction and we'll get our first guest in here. The Atheist Experience is a product of the Atheist Community of Austin, a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to the promotion of atheism, critical thinking, secular humanism, and the separation of religion and government. And those sound like things we really need right now. So like and share a lot, friends. We're going to grab the first in line. Name appears to be Mary from North Carolina. And the text says, working through deconstruction makes me feel guilty. I get that. Mary, can you hear us?
I can. Thank you for taking my call.
Sure thing.
Yeah, I've been deconstructing since 2008, and I was raised in a fundamentalist Christian home, but it was more like a commune. We lived with everybody. And scripture is still so ingrained in my heart. When I'm asking or answering these questions, I still feel this guilt, like I'm betraying God.
Sure. So, I mean, you spent multiple decades in a legalistic religious framework, and you've been deconstructing for how many years? Did I hear 8?
Since 2008. And
2008. Okay.
And then went back twice.
Oh, wow. Yeah, well, that happens too, actually. Twice. Yeah. So, well, let me ask you a question. It took me a long time to deconstruct as well. Mine wasn't entirely linear, and I don't know if everybody's is. What were the factors that first made you question? And then the follow-up is, what made you go back?
Well, when I went to college, I went to community college, and my pastor was actually concerned. He told me that he's seen a lot of good women lose their faith and leave their marriage when they go to higher education, right? Mm-hmm. And I was guarded against that, but I saw a different worldview and started questioning things. I had some really good teachers, especially in religious studies, and started to learn about other religions and mythologies around them, and started questioning my own. And then my brother introduced me to Sam Harris and Christopher Hitchens, and I finally let go of the idea of hell. And that really made me feel free to explore what I believed and ask questions. And the second one was I was going to a Baptist church, And that we did this Bishop Spong study asking the questions. It was a very liberal Baptist church that I was going to. And that started another phase for me. But I went back because of the community. I had lost all my friends and some family. And I kept going back. And it was a very emotional service, a lot of praise and worship. And I missed that really kind of feeling of the Spirit and the connection. But I just couldn't sit through the sermons. I just had a dichotomy in my head for a little while.
I get that.
Yeah.
The community is one of the things I hear the most when people are deconstructing. That I miss the community, and some of them lost their families too. They're like, I miss the community and I miss my family, right? And I think that that's a pretty normal thing to do. And it's hard to find new community. You spent your whole life building this community, and you don't want to spend the rest of your life building another community, right? So I really understand where you're coming from there. It sounds to me like you want to be part of it for the community, even though you don't necessarily believe it anymore. Is that an accurate description?
That is, yeah.
Okay. Well, maybe something to think about.
The one thing that helped me is I discovered your show last week, and just hearing you talk about the Bible. And so I ordered the Skeptic's Annotated Bible because I wanted to study the Bible a different way. And I think that will help me a lot.
For sure.
Yeah, there's a number of really good resources. Richard Carrier's got some really good resources. I'm forgetting a name. The other one that Christians, who's an atheist now, Bible scholar. Bart Ehrman has some really good stuff. And these are just courses you can take. They do charge a little bit, but it's well worth it because these are actual scholars that you're learning from, and you're learning it from a scholarly point of view. If you really kind of want to study it from that, and then find other Bible scholars, not just preachers or apologists, because they have a different viewpoint. They're trying to make sense of the Bible, whereas the scholars are actually trying to put it in its historical context and figure out where it comes from. Elaine Pagels is another one who's really, really good on that. And then once you start there with those folks, you'll branch out into more scholarly work where they're actually looking at the history. And not all these scholars are atheists, by the way. I think Elaine Pagels is still a Christian. She may be the only one we've mentioned that is, but the vast majority of biblical scholars are theists. So, and they have to juxtapose their belief with what they know, which is why Kip Davis.
Kip Davis.
Yeah, is another one. If you want to know anything about the Dead Sea Scrolls, he's kind of the guy for the Dead Sea Scrolls. Because he's done the most work on them, starting with his pre-doctorate, if I remember correctly, and his doctoral and postdoc work is all on Dead Sea Scrolls. So, but you're talking about the community, and yeah, that's the hardest thing. Just find a secular community, Meetup, Facebook, list out, come up with 3 or 4 or 5 things that you really like to do. Go find groups that are doing that on Facebook or Meetup and go do it with them. And you can build up a really nice community, a really tight community of friends. It's hard, but you can definitely do it.
I joined one of those in Greensboro years ago, but when COVID came, they stopped. So I might find one again. Those are good suggestions.
I think sometimes it's hard, but you kind of have to, as they used to say in dating, you have to put yourself out there. One of my best friends I actually met one night when I was just out grabbing a beer. We just happened to find each other at a bar. I sat next to him. It turned out that we were interested in the same stuff. I found out that he grew up not far from where I grew up. and we've been friends now for 20 years, and his friends became my friends. I had like a whole new community that I adopted. So like sometimes just like getting yourself to leave the house and go do something social and getting to push yourself to interact with people that you haven't met yet can really open up a lot of doors. Now, listen, I've gone out before and met some horrific people that I never want to see again. But I've also met some very delightful people just by getting out and forcing myself to be social.
Well, thank you. I'll do that.
Yeah. And maybe I'll just add one more thing. Sorry to pile on. Like, it's okay if you're still like friends and socialize with the people in your church. Like, I understand that there's a little bit that you feel that division in you because like, well, I don't believe this stuff anymore. Right. But like, you know, most of my friends and family still believe as well. And if I get to go to church and see them, I'm perfectly happy to do so. In fact, I'll be going to a service not too long from now. Right. So I understand that, that aspect of it. And there's nothing wrong with that. I don't know if you need to feel weird or guilty about that, as long as you're not like leading them on, making them think that you're back in the faith again.
Right. Yeah.
I have quite a few friends that are Christians because I'm in a 12-step program as well. And we just don't talk about that. We just, because they know that my higher power is different than theirs. And so the reason we're together is to stay sober. And so we talk about different things. So I have a lot of people in my circle that are believers, and we're still very good friends. They don't try to change my mind. I don't try to change theirs, you know.
That's good. Well, congrats on being sober. That's a huge achievement.
Yes.
3 years. Thank you.
Congratulations. That's awesome.
W.
Thank you.
Well, Mary, thanks so much for calling. It was delightful to hear from you.
Well, thanks for taking my call. You have a good day.
Absolutely. Have a good one. That is tough, Jim.
Yeah, finding community again and rebuilding it, especially if it's, like she said, she's coming from a commune type situation where they're all living on the same compound, it sounds like. So you have that tight knit community built in. Right. But it's amazing. You can go find, there's, I do scuba diving and I drive my Jeep off road as much as I can. Those are two very different communities, but they're still very secular communities. And guess what? God doesn't come up hardly at all. And I'm in South Alabama. I can drive 2 hours to the east and be in Georgia, and an hour, hour, maybe less to the south, I'm in Florida. So I'm right in that corner. I've got probably 4 churches within walking distance of me. So, if we're not talking about it, you can definitely find it, but you do have to go out and you do have to, find it. And that's why it says, come up with like 4 or 5 things you like to do or might like to do, and then go find those places. Keep yourself kind of busy while you figure out what's going to work and what isn't. Do you really like it enough to do with other people? And if it's something where everyone's doing kind of the same thing or working towards the same goal, it gives you that same type of community feeling, because that's exactly what you're doing, in a church, et cetera, is working towards a goal, working towards a thing. And so even if it's just something like, we go out and drive along the coast, that's all doing the same kind of thing. We all have the same kinds of experiences. So, yeah.
Couldn't agree more. Find people that you enjoy doing things with. Join a club. I've met great friends by joining adult clubs. You'd be surprised. There's a lot of adult clubs out there. But Jim, we've got some super chats and some more guests. Let's do this. How about let's read a couple super chats, and then I'll grab our next guest, and we'll keep the show moving. We got maybe an agnostic from Kansas named Ben that wants to talk about leaving room for God. But before we do that, Gretchen Z, great to see you tonight. Gretchen, thank you for the $10 super chat. Gretchen says, the Last Supper, Jesus passed out bread and said, "This is my body." As he poured wine, said, "This is my blood." As he grabbed a jar of mayo, Judas jumped and said, "I just realized I got to be somewhere."
That's an oldie but a goodie.
That's great. And Johnny Morris, thank you for the $2 super chat. Johnny says, "You both rule." Well, thank you, Johnny. Really appreciate that. And last one for now from our friend Forum. Forum, thank you for the $5 super chat and for being a member of the channel. Says, I just ate a ghost pepper for the very first time. Whoa, holy shit. I never had any kind of transcendent experience before, but hot damn good pain.
Yes.
That's tough. I did that once and it wasn't even fully ripe and it wiped me out for the rest of the day. I was done.
Yeah, good ghost pepper will do that. There's some restaurants here doing ghost peppers where the ghost pepper has been turned down, and I really do like the entire taste of it. But if it's a regular ghost pepper, you're not tasting the ghost pepper because your taste buds are gone and your nerve endings are shot for the rest of the day, without a doubt. And I like spicy food most of the time. And if you do eat ghost peppers, I highly recommend a gallon of ice cream. That way later on, as it's passing through, you can wait for the ice cream to go through too.
Ice cream's essential. Let's bring in Ben. Ben's from Kansas, and Ben is asking, science doesn't explain spirituality. Could there be room for God there? Ben, can you hear us?
Hey, yeah, I can hear you.
Awesome.
How are you guys doing?
Can you... Doing well. Thanks for asking. Can you kind of flesh out your introduction? Like, what do you think is lacking that we would want to leave room for God in?
Well, I guess I'll just give you a little bit of background and then I'll ask the question if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. Make it. Yeah, I mean,
if
it helps make your argument that for spirituality and leaving room for God, sure. Go ahead.
So I was raised in a fundamentalist Baptist household, where people didn't question their faith, and they always wondered, I always wondered why people judged other people's beliefs, but didn't question their own, And I've seen quite a bit of the Atheist Experience, and at first I was, resistant to what you time. Your arguments have helped me think more critically and work through some pretty difficult questions. And right now I'm kind of on the fence between atheism and theism. It's like I want to believe in God, but I haven't really found convincing evidence. And so for me, just recently, a question that's kind of popped up is particle wave duality. It shows that reality is kind of stranger than what we think. And it makes me wonder if there's a deeper layer to existence that we don't yet grasp. And I'm not saying that that's evidence of God, but it kind of keeps me open to the idea that there could be something beyond what we currently understand.
Well, how is that spirituality? I mean, yeah, quantum mechanics kind of screws everything up for a lot of things, especially for any of the cosmological arguments for God. I think it pretty much closes the book and says those are done because we know there's just too much randomness there. But does that mean that there's potential for God to be there? I guess the question is which God? If it's the God of the Bible, no, because the triomni God of the Bible, the one who's omnipresent, omnipotent, and omnibenevolent, can't logically exist if there's evil in the world. He could only exist if there is no evil in the world. So that kind of God can't possibly exist. If you're talking about like a elemental God that has control over storms or whatever, those gods clearly don't exist. So when you say that there's room for God, what kind of God is there? Certainly not the God of the Bible in any stretch of the imagination, right? Because he can't possibly exist because nothing about him fits with reality. Even if you get rid of the triomni properties, which are relatively recent to Christianity, and I say relatively recent, I think it's 4th, 5th century. Justin will correct me on that if I'm completely off, I'm sure. So it's just problematic. So when you say there's room for God, I think you got to define that God just to know if there's room for him. And how does he interact with the universe and what did he do?
That's a fair point. I guess I mean God more as like ultimate reality or the ground of being, like not necessarily a specific deity.
What do you mean by grounded
really
reality?
Kind of think of it like,
yeah, that was my first question is what do you mean by grounded reality? Yeah.
Well, it's just that there's so much we don't understand about it.
Sure.
I guess reality.
But why would we?
It seems like the deeper we go, the fuzzier it gets.
Well, in terms of reality, go ahead, Jim.
As I say, in terms of the fuzzier it gets, I mean, we kind of know a lot about quantum mechanics. You know, the last thing we didn't know was the Higgs boson particle, and that came out exactly as the math predicted.
From CERN.
Yeah, and you know, that's kind of what they're doing now, is just going back and proving the math, so to speak. Well, not so to speak, that's what they're doing. And there hasn't been anything super new or truly groundbreaking. They have found some things that have shaken up particular areas of quantum mechanics. But to say we don't know, you know, we know quite a bit, at least according to our math. So when you say we don't know enough, I mean, yeah, that's probably true. And there's always going to be more to learn, more than likely. So yeah, but what does that have to do with the grounded reality or God?
I mean, well, I guess I'm not trying to claim that it proves God. I just think it shows how surprising reality can be. And I wonder how I can appreciate that mystery without turning it into dogma, so to speak.
Sure. Can I ask you a question about the? It sounds like you're trying to figure out like why there is reality as opposed to not reality, and so that's why you're looking for like ontological grounding. But like the question I would have is like, I don't see like if you envision some sort of a like deistic God that grounds all this, we still run it afoul of the same problem, which is like we have no explanation for the grounding of a deistic God, right? So as far as I'm concerned, I'm looking at this and I'm thinking it just makes more sense that, you know, whatever exists is going to be a naturalistic phenomenon. It might be true that there's naturalistic phenomenon that we don't know about. We don't fully understand it yet, right? But everything we learn about the universe as we gain more knowledge points towards naturalistic causes. So I'm inclined to believe that a naturalistic cause is going to be the next step, as opposed to something that has a mind and created all things. Because once you add a mind into the equation, there needs to be explanations for why the mind does anything. And that's when it gets really difficult, because like if a mind created all this, it had all that power, created the entire universe, but then created the shit show here on the earth, man, we got a lot of problems. I think Occam's razor would do us well just to not needlessly multiply entities.
Yeah.
The simplest solution is often the correct one.
Yeah. Well, the simplest solution that explains the most or all of the phenomena is usually the correct one.
Yeah.
You don't need to overly complicate things. But you know, this also is somewhat similar to the something from nothing argument we hear from theists. And the fact is that energy can never be created nor destroyed, not by God, not by anyone or anything. And so energy is not nothing, it is something. But even if, and that's just kind of the scientific basis, and then they've done some experiments to prove that the nothing that philosophers talk about can't possibly exist, right? And that's a problem if you're going to do this something from nothing. That's a problem for the biblical God as well, because he created the universe out of nothing. Again, energy can't be created or destroyed, and nothing can't possibly exist. So, according to our best science that we have so far, but also, if we assume the philosophical nothing, that would also mean that there are no rules against that nothing spontaneously creating something, right? Because that rule wouldn't exist.
That's an interesting
thought. Richard Carrier's got a really, really good long argument that I don't really want to necessarily get into. I've got it here in my notes somewhere if we really want to. But he makes a really, really compelling argument that if absolute nothing really existed, then something would come out of it, just because that's more likely than anything else. And he gets into the math and makes a really good philosophical argument against it. But I don't buy the something from nothing at all. That argument just doesn't work for me. It doesn't work for me from a scientific point of view, and it doesn't work for me from a philosophical point of view either. It's just a really bad argument.
I know, and it's honestly kind of hard to explain because I'm just like on the fence about a lot of stuff. I guess if I had to just summarize it, like, would you consider it to be reasonable for people to feel spiritual inspiration or not from the strangeness of reality? And if not, like, could you give some examples of some stuff that I could read to help me with that?
I think it's okay to feel like a little bit of awe and wonder at the universe, because it's pretty cool. Like, the universe is really cool.
Yeah.
And I thought about this a long time. When we look at certain features, like we see a really big mountain range, we're kind of full of awe and wonder. But I remember the first time I saw a really large expansion bridge, I was like, I had a very similar feeling of awe and wonder. But I'm like, hey, human beings built this.
Grand Canyon,
like, this is
in person.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
So my suggestion is
so
like
crazy. I saw a little helicopter flying in there, and it looked just absolutely minuscule. You know, the scale of it is just like, whoa, so awesome.
Or like the Hoover Dam, right? But like the awe and wonder is not reserved for naturalistic things like the Grand Canyon and whatnot. It's also for human-made things, and I think that tells us that humans just naturally were kind of impressed by very large structures.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Or just things that you know, I find it interesting too that some of the most beautiful places in the world are also places where foraging for food, if you know, back in the day, would have been easier. Heavily forested areas, finding things in mountains, and you know, civilization grew up on the banks where you could fish. So yeah, I think there's also a bit of evolution in there, but seeing things and being awe-inspired by them has absolutely nothing to do with spirituality. It's just enjoying being human.
Wow. That's pretty cool. I guess it's just dealing with those. And it's funny you even mentioned foraging. I like to do that. I live out in the country, and I've been doing that a lot. It's just, I guess, happy to be alive. You know, I don't.
Right.
Yeah. It's just kind of hard. If we have time for one more question, it's kind of off topic. Is that okay?
Sure.
So because of my journey, you know, I was just wondering how I can maintain a good relationship with my very religious family when our beliefs are so different. And it's like, I don't want to lie about what I believe, but I don't want to turn every visit into a debate or feel like I'm betraying myself by staying quiet. I don't know if these are something that you guys have been through, but any help would be appreciated.
Yeah. My parents don't know that I'm an atheist, or at least I don't think they do. I've never told them, and they're not on the internet, and they're not anywhere where they can run into me. Now, my cousins, to include my mom's sister and her sister-in-law, are on the internet, and they both know. So do most of my cousins. Now, have they told my parents? I don't know. But my parents aren't super strict. They asked me to go to Mass, and I say, no, thanks. And I leave it at that. I don't offer anything, and they kind of accept that. So your family is going to be a little bit different. You're going to have to navigate your own way, and I don't know that there's a good way to do it. Depending, you know, I know atheists who have good relationship with their highly religious parents, but they set boundaries, and there are consequences for crossing those boundaries, like going no contact for a period of time. And I know atheists who just have horrible relationships with their families. So the only thing I can really give you is best of luck, and try to remember what your focus is keeping them in your lives while also establishing boundaries.
Right. And
I appreciate that.
I would ask,
go ahead, sorry.
Like, do you want to maintain a tight relationship with them? Is that your goal?
I completely changed my career into healthcare, and nobody in my family really does that. So I actually moved back to be closer with them so that I could offer that part of what I can be helpful with to them. So it's kind of like I really, and we've had a lot, my family has had a lot of health problems, and this coming up this last year has been crazy. And so that's one of the main reasons why I moved back. But it's like, I pretty much have to, not have to, it is my choice, obviously, but I'm around them and I want to help them in that instance. But it's just with my dad, I pretty much just never talk about it. We just don't go into it. And then some of my other family are definitely more open with it, but it just becomes so heated, and, you know, the same arguments that you guys hear, I'm sure, you know, ad nauseum over and over. It's the same thing, and they will not be convinced in any way. And I've tried, honestly, just to not be disingenuous. I've read many different books on different religions to kind of like maybe get a bridge to even get them, you know, like say, hey, like there's many other gods, but you just believe in this one, you know, like it's like just trying to help. But also I don't, you know, I don't want to force them into anything, you know. I'm just there to help. It's kind of hard topic to stay away from because they love to talk about it, you know. So
and that's fair. You know, I have a very like right-leaning political family, but I have one aunt who has always been very left-leaning, and I didn't even know about it until I was in my late teens. I had no idea. And it was really interesting. And I asked her when I got older, how come you never talk about politics? Because she clearly was very interested in politics. She worked for the government for a long time. And she's like, I love my family. It's not worth fighting over. And I was like, oh, well, that's fair. Right. And so like, I think you do have to, at some level, ask yourself, like, is your priority to maintain your family relationship? If that's the priority, then you kind of have to sometimes, you know, not talk about a subject that you might want to talk about. However, if like your family is using religion in a dangerous way, that's when you might want to speak up when the conversation comes up and, you know, present facts or evidence or arguments that may or may not be persuasive. Certainly you're not going to persuade your family to think like you, but you can at least have an answer ready for when they come at you with some of these things.
I mean, and it's the craziest thing because what I guess such an ironic statement of common sense, you think that people would understand, but like sometimes arguing with them, it just, they will not accept it, you know?
Certainly
and
not.
I don't owe them silence, you know. I just want to be honest. I don't want to worry about like hurting them, you know, because I want to be there for them. But I guess I'm just trying to share gradually because I want to be honest about myself too, you know.
Well, there's nothing dishonest about not telling them you're an atheist or not having those conversations. Because, I mean, as someone who is obviously on a show as often as I am and looking to do more shows, I would still say that atheism is still 20% of my life, maybe 10%.
Yeah.
And so for me to talk about anything else isn't being dishonest. I don't talk about scuba diving to non-scuba divers. I don't talk about, you know, driving off-road to people who aren't driving off-road all the time. We talk about things that we have common interest in. That's not being disingenuine. That's just being genuine. So there's no dishonesty on your part there, as far as I'm concerned.
Okay. Well, I mean, what you guys have said have been really helpful. Thank you a lot. I mean, I enjoy what you guys are doing, and honestly, it has been very helpful in my journey. Like I said, I was pretty resistant at first, but over the years, you know, as I've traveled and met more people, I've just realized that, you know, there's so much. There's just a better logical and rational way to approach things, and it's been very helpful.
Yeah.
So thank you guys. I appreciate it.
Well, thanks for calling in, Ben. And best of luck to you, and best of luck with your family relationships.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Cheers, friend.
I appreciate it. Yep. Bye.
I think that's such a common problem. There's so many people that live in like a small blue dot, and where they think differently than those around them. And it's difficult to be authentic, but also preserve relationships. That's a hard thing.
It's the hardest thing in the world. Families are rough, especially the more religious families, especially, like the J-dubs are really willing to shun you and cut off all contact. And others that are just as extreme will also do that. So coming out as an atheist, especially for the young folks who are under 18 and can't sign rental agreements, can't work full time because of child labor laws and all that, the hardest thing in the world is just tell them, keep your mouth shut, keep your head down, wait till you're 18. Because that could be just as dangerous as telling them nothing at all, or to do anything else. So yeah, this Christian idea that it's okay to throw your children to the wolves is just horrifyingly bad. And it's not uncommon. And if you read the Bible, I think that you can actually make that case that shunning and ostracizing people is a thing to do.
Yep, sure can. It's absolutely in there. Yeah. Well, let me grab the next 3 super chats, and then I'm going to do some announcements, and we'll get Daisy on the line next. We've got a $20 super chat from our friend Jason Jones. Thank you so much, Jason. Jason from Seattle. Thanks you for your work. Well, Jason, I really appreciate that. And thank you for supporting our work, and thank you for supporting the ACA. We've also got another super chat from our friend, Maryland. Maryland, thank you so much for the $5 super chat. Maryland says, Justin is God. Well, Maryland, we appreciate you supporting the stream. Good to see you as always. And last, our friend Amir. Thank you so much, Amir, for the $5 super chat and for being a member of the channel. Amir says, question for the esteemed panel, please. Have you looked at and really considered the trees? Checkmate. Oh, also follow up. Where do you come from?
My mama's belly.
I have to be careful. I went for a long hike the other day and I almost came back theist. It was a tough one. Oh, wow.
Yeah, very tough. We have a lot of trees down here in southern Alabama, and just driving around is really, really hard. But it's a wide variety of trees, so you get to contemplate different types of trees. Some of them grow in swamps, some don't, So, yeah.
Well, friends, we've got some announcements. We now have a channel that houses all of the ACA shows in audio podcast form. And you can find it at tiny.cc/AEN podcast. We'll say it again, tiny.cc/AEN podcasts. There you can listen to all the latest shows from the Atheist Experience, Talk Heathen, Truth Wanted, and the nonprofits, as well as others on the channel. Another way you can support the channel, as you already know, is through super chats. We get them in the show. We read them during and after the show as well, as many as we can. And we love audience participation. We love to hear from the audience and be able to interact with you. The ACA also wants you to know what's going on in our community. So you can find that at the atheist-community.org and learn about the organization itself, its policies, how you can get involved as well. And last but certainly not least, I want to send a big thank you to the crew who puts this show together every week. And we were just talking about this before the stream. The crew who runs the show makes life so much easier for the host because all we have to do is get up here and talk. So send a big thank you to the operators, the audio operators, the note takers, the video operators, the call screeners, and the chat moderators, because they're making our load much, much lighter up here. As they say, many hands make the load light. Is that how they say that?
Yeah. And it's true. They make our lives so much easier. And of course, the folks who answer our mail, another Justin, they do a lot more than they take a lot more than people will give them credit for sometimes. But yes, the folks who answer our mail are also part of that crew.
Speaking of answering mail, I see people commenting after the streams in the comments of the videos wanting us to answer their questions. And I'll just let you know now, if you want your questions answered, you have to call in the show. I don't go into these comments and debate you after the show. You've got to pull your britches up and get in and call in the show if you want to prove Jim and I wrong.
We don't bite much. But do get ready to have a conversation.
Indeed. Let's get Daisy into the chat. Daisy is from Washington and is asking, is there a way to actually disprove dogmatic religions unlike deism? This is a fair question. Did you need any addition to that? Any clarification, Daisy?
I think that's pretty much it. It's like, is there a way that dogmatic religions can be disproved? Like I understand that deism can't really be disproved necessarily, but like, do you think that just take the example of like the God of the Bible? Is there a way that you can disprove that?
Sure. Yeah.
Sure. Which version of the God of the Bible? We can
That
just start
was
there,
the right question.
because there's multiple versions of that God. There's at least, now some people say 10,000. I'll go with what I can prove and say there's 1,000 different religions, all of which disagree on some fundamental point of dogma, and they all claim the Bible as their source. So which God of the Bible are you talking about? And yeah, just start there.
Well,
Right.
I was recently having a discussion with an Episcopalian, and I kept bringing things up, like, how there's slavery in the Bible and like the problem of evil, and about the thing about the testing of women's virginity and how that's wrong. And they kept saying, oh, no, we don't believe that kind of thing. And we accept gay and trans people and stuff because we don't take the Bible literally in that way. And
Yeah, laws are not literal anymore.
What's that?
So if they're telling you that laws are not literal anymore, I think they're more confused than just about anybody. Like the most literal part of the Bible are the laws, right?
Right.
Well, let me give you. Can I give you some nuggets that you might want to take and use in the future? Because there's a couple things you can write down if you're trying to do some work on debunking the Jesus nonsense. I would start with a 2-for-1, which is show that the Bible contradicts itself and show that the contradictions come directly from Jesus. I think these are problematic for a lot of Christians. Once they see that Jesus can say things wrong, there's all kinds of problems that they can't reconcile. So for example, if you go to Matthew 27 and then go down to verse 7, it talks about Jesus being betrayed for the 30 pieces of silver. But listen to what it says in 7 and 8. It says, after conferring together, they used them to buy the potter's field as a place to bury foreigners. For this reason, that field has been called the field of blood to this day. Then was fulfilled what had been spoken through the prophet Jeremiah, and they took 30 pieces of silver, the price of the one on whom a price had been set, on whom some of the people of Israel had set a price. So the author right here of Matthew, referring to Jesus's betrayal, is just wrong. Jeremiah didn't say anything. He actually just quoted Zechariah. He quoted Zechariah and attributed it to Jeremiah, which was just all complete flub. He completely flubbed it. Jesus does the same thing in Matthew 23. Matthew 23? Yeah, Matthew 23, let me grab it real quick. In verse 34, he talks about the wrong Zechariah. In verse 35, he talks about a Zechariah that was martyred. As is, upon you may come all the righteous blood shed on the earth, from the blood of the righteous Abel to the blood of Zechariah, son of Berechiah, whom you murdered between the sanctuary and the altar. But that's not correct. That's the wrong Zechariah. In 2 Chronicles 24, where it records the death of that Zechariah, it's not actually the son of Berechiah. Did I say that right? Yeah, Berechiah. It's the son of Jehoiada. So, like, we've got lots of instances of the New Testament just completely flubbing the Old Testament. One of my other favorites is Jesus in Luke chapter 4 misapplies Isaiah 61 to himself. If you just read all the way to verse 4, it's clear that it didn't come true. He also misquotes other parts of the Old Testament, like he completely flubs in Matthew 22 what's happening in Psalm 110 because he can't read Hebrew. He's only reading the Greek. And so once you start pointing out the problems with Jesus himself, not even understanding what's in the Hebrew Bible, it's very difficult for them to come back from that, because they think even though the Bible could have an error in it, they wouldn't expect an error to be in Jesus's own words.
Right. Even if they were Episcopalians.
Right, because Episcopalians aren't always like inerrantists. Like there's Episcopalians that can hold to a biblical view that still contains like some errors. But once you start showing them problems with like, well, Jesus himself said things that just aren't true, now they've got some stuff to wrestle with. Now, my favorite topic, of course, and I would spend all day, every day talking about it, is just reading the prophecies that are supposedly applied to Jesus. If you go to the book of Matthew, just do the first 2 chapters. Go to those prophecies that are quoted and go back to the Old Testament where they're quoted from and read them in the original context. You can easily just demonstrate quite quickly that Jesus didn't fulfill them in the context they were given. Like Hosea 11:1 talks about the son coming out of Egypt, but that's preposterous. Hosea 11:1 is about the Israelites coming out of Egypt. Israel is God's firstborn. It's a quotation of Exodus 4, verse 22. So the reality is, once you start looking at how Jesus didn't fulfill a single prophecy, we got a lot of big problems here. Jesus doesn't know the Old Testament properly. The gospel authors don't even know what a prophecy is. And so, like, what are we supposed to believe about this Jesus character when the Gospels clearly are lying about the Hebrew Bible? Why would we believe them on something as monumental as a guy like raising from the dead?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're totally. That is way better than anything I could have thought of like on the spot when I was talking to this person. It's just, it seemed so slippery. Where like anytime I would bring up something, they would say, oh, like, no, we don't believe it like that. We like have this new progressive interpretation. And I was just thinking like, well, you could probably, you couldn't really disprove a God exist, like a prime mover or something like that. But like, I feel like, I've watched the show for a long time. I've watched other shows. Like I've been really, really uncomfortably reading the Bible lately to sort of like see what it said. And it's and the Quran as well. It's like a lot of the stuff is kind of hard to get through because it's in this, like the sentences are really difficult to, they're in this kind of language that just is not, it doesn't really make too much sense. When I'm sure you like, I know Justin, you have like a lot of knowledge on this, but like it's really hard to read the Bible and come away with some kind of good interpretation that you think like that you've got it, like you've actually understood the sentence and that kind of thing. But
it certainly can be difficult, if you're not used to it.
Yeah. Just one other thing. Like, do you think that there's like, do you know much about like other religions? Do you think that there's like in the Quran or like in Buddhism or anything like that? Do you think that there's those same types of things, like these contradictions that can kind of show that the dogma is like it could be shown to be wrong?
Yeah. I think Jim's got some stuff to say about this as well, but like in Islam, there's like clearly things that are untrue. It says that Muhammad split the moon in two. That's in the Hadith. Clearly didn't happen. We also have like preposterous stuff. Like it talks about how sperm in the Quran comes from between the backbone and the ribs. It doesn't. It gets embryology wrong, the order of development of the embryo. And then there's like really nonsensical passages that are just like wrong and sexist. Like in the Quran, 282 says, in regards to doing a financial contract, if there are not 2 men available to serve as witnesses, then a man and 2 women, such as you agree, for witnesses, so that if one of them errs, the other can remind her. So there's this baked in idea that like women are insufficient compared to men mentally. And if you read the hadiths and the tafsir, they say the same thing. So in one hadith, Sahih Bukhari, it says, this is because of the deficiency of a woman's mind. They're baked into this religion is that women are deficient. They're less than men, especially in terms of memory. The funny thing is we've done like actual scientific studies, and it turns out women have superb memories, much better than men. So this idea that women can't serve as good witnesses because their mind is deficient because they could remember something wrong is asinine.
That's wild.
Have you heard of street epistemology?
Yeah.
That's a really good technique for finding out, basically asking, how do you know that ad nauseum without sounding like a 3-year-old? But that's basically what a lot of it is asking questions. So you don't have to know a lot about Hinduism or Buddhism or anything else to ask questions about it. And to be able to ask questions in such a way that you're actually trying to discover how they know that, why do they believe that? What's the root cause? What's the evidence do they have? And there's a lot of really good stuff out there. Anthony Magnabosca is probably one of the better ones out there. And he's a real good guy. I've met him a couple of times. But, the website's a good place. On Street Epistemology is a good place to get started with that. You don't have to know everything to help people to discover the truth. You just have to be willing to ask good questions, listen to the answers so that you can generate more good questions. And that's the best way to go about doing that. And that's for every religion, right? Or even you prefer Superman over Batman. You can use street epistemology to figure out why somebody likes Superman more than Batman. So it's not just religious questions. It's any particular point of knowledge that somebody may know more than you do. And people know more about their own beliefs than most people. But if you watch enough Anthony Magnabosca and enough street epistemology folks, you'll be able to pick up the rhythm and figure out how to ask those questions while listening, just for your own edification, because somebody could actually have a good reason. That's why we do this show. Although today I'm doing this show just to see if we can get theists to answer the questions, yes or no questions with yes or no, but we haven't had any theists yet today. So that may have scared them off with that.
Well, that does make a lot of sense. I'm trying to read the Bible and the Quran and some other stuff in order to be better at like addressing some of the conversations, but I see how street epistemology could be like, the difficulty that I have is that I think that a lot of theists will sort of cling on to belief just sort of without good reasons for it. They'll just, it's just because like their family, like their little town or whatever is like all this kind of way. And so that it's just sort of like this, they're very, they just sort of believe it because they believe it,
Yeah, and that's very much the case. And asking the right questions can do more to expose that. The type of debate that Justin and I do on this show and everyone else does on the ACA shows and others as well, often runs into the backfire effect. We know that that's going to happen. The more you directly oppose someone's ideas, the more strongly entrenched they can become, which is why I would say we don't do these shows necessarily to win the argument with the caller. It's the people who are listening, and that happens a lot more than a caller going, "Oh yeah, you're right. I no longer believe." So in street epistemology is a way around that because you're not opposing someone's ideas, you're exploring their ideas. and you're doing it in a very non-confrontational way. But even so, it's not going to be one conversation. It may be dozens of conversations, and it may not be the conversation with you. Maybe it's the conversation with you that gets them listening to this show. And then it's a conversation that they listen to that actually convinces them. It's not a one and done process, and it's not a short process. Ask anybody who's deconverted. It takes a long time.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was lucky because I was never really forced into Christianity. Like, my family was Christian. They were Presbyterians, but my family basically just didn't care what I believed. And when I was like 12, I actually I emailed the ACA to try to determine if I was agnostic or atheist or both or that kind of thing. And they really helped me through that. But honestly, this has been really helpful. And Justin and Jim, I'll look up both of the things that you recommended, and I really appreciate it. You're two of my heroes. So
sure thing, friend. Yeah. Best luck to you.
All right. Bye-bye.
I mean, interesting question. I do think personally, I think everyone has a different approach to tackling the religious topics. And I think personally, I've always favored the debunking the book. But, there's a lot of people that don't have dogmatic views of the books. So debunking the book doesn't really do it for them. Like, you have to start with philosophy.
Yeah. Catholics are not strict interpretation. In fact, Bible only is a heresy to the stricter Catholics, because the Bible was not written as Christianity for dummies. They see it as a different book, but they also don't take it literally. The question then becomes, well, what do you take literally and what don't you take literally, and how you decide what you do, right? Which do you take literally and which don't? Like, Catholics don't take Genesis as being factually true. So how do you decide what is and isn't true, right? If Genesis isn't true, then how do you get to the resurrection, right? If the flood isn't true, how do you get to the resurrection? And so they take that as fable and myth, and there's some truths there, but not, it's not literally word for word true. And I think your style works better with a lot of evangelicals who are Bible only, every word is true type folk. So yeah, it is harder. But even with Catholicism, there's stuff you can get into that just, where does this come from? Where does papal infallibility come from? But first, sometimes you got to get a Catholic to figure out what that is and how the church defines it, because no two Catholics believe the same thing on that. And Italian Catholics don't believe the same thing as German Catholics. American Catholics are a whole different beast. So, yeah.
Quite true. Well, we got one super chat from our friend, Psychological Projectionist. Thank you for the super chat. It says, in my opinion, we can't disprove anything, but we can show it's almost infinitely improbable by demonstrating an infinity of equally disprovable candidate gods. Actually, I don't entirely disagree with that. That's one of the reasons why you'll see behind me the grounding of all grounding, Doug and Sharon Stone, because every argument for God I can easily make for these two back behind me, the Rock of Salvation and the Co-Redemptrix. So certainly there are lots of arguments that could be had against God, even if we wouldn't classify them as proofs.
Yeah, proofs exist in mathematics and evidence is for everything else. And sometimes we screw those words up and use proof when we mean evidence. But
right, indeed. Well, let's grab Hannah from the queue. Hannah, we know quite well. Hannah's coming in this time, says modern physics is evidence that the Kabbalah is revealed by God. Can't wait to see how this goes. Hannah, welcome back to the Atheist Experience.
Hey, so I just, sorry, is there any background noise or am I coming in clear?
I mean, it's okay.
Clear.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to say that I think basically that principles of modern physics are evidence that Kabbalah, which is the Jewish mystical tradition, is revealed by God. So I don't know if either of you
Are you
have
Jewish now?
any. Well, I'm a Noahide.
Oh, gotcha. So you're a Noahide Jew. How long have you been a Noahide Jew?
So a Noahide is someone who's not a member of Nation of Israel, but subscribes to
I know.
Jewish philosophy. But I've been a Noahide for years.
Okay, just asking. So what's the scientific evidence that proves that Jewish mysticism is true?
The first piece of evidence is the fact that there are 10 sefirot, which are 10 attributes of God described in Kabbalah, and then 10 dimensions which modern quantum physicists discuss. So that's evidence one. I believe that the 10 sefirot are manifest and correlated to the 10 dimensions that quantum physicists discuss. So that's the first piece of evidence. And then
so let's just start there. How is that not a coincidence?
Well, basically because if we're talking about the idea that there's a fundamental nature, at the fundamental nature of reality, that there's 10 essential attributes and 10 dimensions in the physics, and then the 10 attributes of God.
Coincidence.
To me, well, you could say it's a coincidence.
Well, that's exactly what it sounds like, right? Because quantum physics and those 10 dimensions are things that we got to from math, and you're saying it was written in some book by some thing that that neither Justin or I accept as existing. So you got to do some work here. You can't just go, oh, look, these two, you got 10 here and 10 here. So what? You got to do some more work for that. So how do you get from God to 10 aspects of God being the same thing as 10 dimensions?
It would be a probabilistic argument rather than an argument from certainty. But the probabilistic argument would be Occam's razor says that a postulate that has fewer assumptions built into it is more likely to be true, to my understanding of formation of Occam's razor, and it requires fewer assumptions to say that there's 10 dimensions.
And God is an extra assumption. God is an extra assumption. The existence of God is not 10 dimensions, but 11 things now, not 10, right? So you actually have more complications by adding God in there, which means Occam's razor says you're also wrong.
Well, but the Occam's razor part is that it requires more assumptions to assume that it's a coincidence that the Kabbalists got this idea that there's 10 dimensions of reality, right? And that happens to align with quantum physics when they had no understanding of quantum physics.
Yeah, you misunderstood me. You misunderstood me. Occam's razor disproves the claim that there are 10 dimensions to a God. And that is the same thing as 10 dimensions, right? Because now you're saying 10 dimensions in a God. That is one more thing, the claim of a God, than there are, and they're just 10 dimensions. So even if we accept the coincidence is true, it's simpler to say that there are 10 dimensions than there is, say, 10 dimensions and a God, right?
Well, yes, but that's only if you assume that God is unnecessary, but God could be postulated as a necessary assumption.
Has absolutely nothing to do with Occam's razor, does it? I can explain everything with 10 dimensions, and I don't need a God to do it. Therefore, Occam's razor tells me that God isn't necessary.
Well, yes, it would say that unless there's evidence for God, and now I'm getting into the other arguments, the other evidence from God from modern physics. That was just the first half of the evidence.
To be sure, the Kabbalah doesn't say anything about 10 dimensions, just so we're clear on this.
Yes, it talks about 10 sefirot, but those 10 sefirot, I'm saying, I believe are evidence that they're correlated to the 10 dimensions, because I believe that God instantiated these 10 sefirot discussed in the Zohar to give people a flavor of modern physics that would later go on to be discovered, and that requires fewer assumptions than it being a coincidence. But that's only half of the evidence.
Because you're still assuming God exists. You're still making one more assumption, one more thing that doesn't cover it, and that is that there's a God exists and that a God did something. Occam's razors, the idea that there are 10 dimensions is simpler than there are 10 dimensions and a God. So you can't use Occam's razor to make your point here, because Occam's razor is always going to favor the no God if you're going to assume that 10 dimensions has anything to do with God. You're just stuck with that.
If God is unnecessary, can I get to the latter half of the evidential, like the other part of the evidence that I think demonstrates God? If that's okay now, to show that
Well,
God.
I would just like to also point out one thing that string theory initially suggested 10 dimensions, but some variants propose 11. So you're still on shaky ground here, even without bringing Occam's razor into it. But yeah, go ahead.
Okay, and then the other half of the evidential argument is that the Heisenberg uncertainty principle is evidence for a Kabbalistic principle known as Rodla. So Rodla is an acronym in Kabbalah for the unknowable Godhead in Hebrew. And basically, the idea is that Heisenberg's uncertainty principle says you can't measure the position and momentum of a particle at the quantum level. And so the idea is that this is also evidence for the Kabbalah being true, because the Kabbalah posits basically that there's an unknowable Godhead, which is a...
Those two things have nothing to do with each other.
Yeah,
right.
The amount of word salad I've heard from you, Hannah, is wild. So just to be clear, let's start at the beginning. One, we have no idea if there's 10 dimensions. Currently, the physics model has 4, maybe 5 dimensions. You don't get to 10 dimensions unless you accept string theory. String theory isn't an accepted thing. Even if there were 10 dimensions, it has nothing to do with the 10 emanations of God in Kabbalah. Your second point is on even weaker foundation than your first point. So your first point didn't actually do anything. So I guess what I'm trying to figure out is why you're now moving on to point number 2 when point number 1 already failed. Is point number 2 stronger than point number 1? Should we consider that first?
Well, yes, but this is a cumulative evidential case for Kabbalah being predictive of quantum.
Yeah, but you're accumulating a giant ball of nothing. So why should we go any further, since so far you haven't built anything on your first foundation you tried to build on doesn't work. Even if it's giving you that 10 dimensions has something to do with 10 emanations, which, I mean, you're going to have to do some work to get there. But even if I grant you that, you brought up Occam's razor, and Occam's razor says that the best explanation is the simplest, and it's always simplest to go with one fewer assumption, and that leaves God out because we can prove the 10 dimensions. We can't prove whether or not there's a God. So you're just dead in the water before you get started. And then you move it on to the uncertainty principle, which is basically there's a limit to the precision with which certain pairs of physical properties, such as position and momentum, can be simultaneously known. So it's not that they can't, there's just a limit to the precision. That is not the same thing as whatever it is you just said about the Kabbalah and God being unknowable. If God is unknowable, then how do we know about him? I mean, let's just start with that. You just start with that. You have built nothing here. So why should we continue with this so-called cumulative case of 0 plus 0?
Well, so just real quick, just to clarify the second, so the first point is, the reason is because I think if you can demonstrate that scientific principles are accurately predicted in Kabbalistic texts, that's evidence for Kabbalah.
You haven't done that.
It's evidence for Kabbalah.
You haven't done that, though.
The second thing is, I think you misrepresented the arguments or the evidence from the Godhead, because it's not saying that God is, in Kabbalah, there's a division on God's essence. And so the Radla, the unknowable Godhead is...
But that has nothing to do with Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, which you tried to link together. The two things are completely different.
Well, the way they're related is that Godhead, or in Hebrew, Resha, Dilio, it's Yalada.
Let me come at it this way. Can you represent this Godhead as a waveform? Can you represent this Godhead in mathematics? Because I can do both for the Heisenberg uncertainty principle.
Well, no, the analogy between quantum physics and the Godhead is not one-to-one. But rather it's saying that this is an element.
Certainly
of God.
not
Basically,
one
But
to one.
that's yeah. Not only it's not. It's an analogy that doesn't make any sense, right? Because when we talk about science, we're talking about things that we can prove through experiment, things that we know through mathematics, that gets backed up by experiments. I mean, we spent billions of dollars to build a super collider to prove that one particle actually exists. That's the Higgs boson, right? And the math turned out to be exactly right, but we still built this collider so we could back the math up. Physicists were hoping they were wrong. And so to say that because of physics, which has all of this evidence behind it, is the same thing as your God, which has no evidence, and to say these two things are analogous just to say that there's evidence, you're not comparing apples to apples by any stretch of the imagination. If you're going to start saying that God exists, you can't go, well, physics exists, therefore God exists. It doesn't make any sense. None whatsoever. You just can't do it. So again, we're back to you building a cumulative case starting with zero and adding nothing to it.
Well, yeah. Oh, well, so that would be true if there is no evidence for God. But the whole idea is that if you can prove there's parallels between Kabbalistic concepts and modern physics concepts, that would be evidence for God, right?
There are no parallels.
not.
There are no parallels because in order to draw the parallel, you need to do math and provide evidence for the Kabbalah. Then you're making a correct, analogous comparison between two things that are the same. You can't do that with God or the Kabbalah. You can't do the math to get to God. Can you conduct an experiment to get to God?
Well, so I don't think you can do an empirical experiment in the laboratory, but similarly,
Then you're not comparing
the
apples to
idea that
apples, are you? You're comparing apples to elephants, and you can't do that either.
To be fair, though, there are also interpretations of modern physics that rely on unproven metaphysical postulates. For example, the many worlds and Copenhagen interpretations posit the many worlds interpretation posits.
Yeah, the many worlds is many worlds is a hypothesis. It's not theory, and yes, the entire jury is out on that. Physicists are debating that, and there isn't much we can do until we can figure out how to figure out what's outside of the universe, or better yet, does outside of the universe make any sense whatsoever? So we're not basing anything on physics on that. That is an area of physics that's still being debated, but nobody is building computers on that level of physics. Nobody is trying to build quantum computers on that type of physics. So yes, that's all out there, but it doesn't really necessarily mean anything because we don't have the experimental data to do it. But we do have some math that seems to show that. But again, we need to actually back that math up with actual evidence to make sure that we're doing the math right, because sometimes there are things we don't understand. So once again, you're not comparing apples to apples. You're not even comparing apples to oranges. You're comparing apples to elephants. You're taking something that is based on good math and good experimental evidence and comparing it to something that can't be expressed in math and has absolutely no experimental evidence to it. So you're not even in the same universe to make these comparisons, to make this analogy.
Well, I understand, but the point is that the evidence can be interpreted in multiple ways, so it's what's known as underdetermined. So the evidence is consistent with the Copenhagen interpretation, the many worlds interpretation, possibly the Bowman interpretation, although I've heard the Bowman interpretation.
So what? So you know what? So is Harry Potter. Who cares? Right?
But you're saying that you need evidence, and I'm saying the evidence can point to multiple directions.
It doesn't.
Yeah.
Right.
So if you want to, really, it doesn't. But if you want to make that claim, I'll go with it, and I will say that modern physics is evidence that Harry Potter is true.
But there's no evidence.
I use the exact same arguments you just gave me to do the same thing. But
I think the evidence is also consistent with Kabbalah, as I understand it. So it's not.
And I think the evidence is also consistent with the. You know what? I don't want to use Harry Potter. Let's use Harry Dresden. It's much better. And Harry Dresden actually has God, and his magic actually works better. So between Harry Dresden's world, so. You know, you can make this comparison, but it doesn't mean anything, right? Harry Dresden lives in Chicago. Chicago is a place that exists. So what? Harry Dresden's magic is kind of sort of based on physics, but not really. So we can do this all day long And we can just take everything you say and substitute Harry Dresden for instead of Kabbalah.
Also, keep in mind,
Okay,
Jim,
so
that in
your
the Harry
argument-
Potter novels, Neville Longbottom won the gold for Gryffindor by 10 points. So, and there's 10 wizarding levels. So, like, I mean, the 10 ordinary
10
wizarding levels.
Yeah.
I mean, clearly, this is indication that Harry Potter is divinely inspired.
Okay, so just
You see how we're making the
here's
same
point that I've
arguments
been
you
making.
are?
What was that?
I said,
broke up for a
you see
second?
how we're making the same points you are? And that it makes absolutely no sense?
Not really, but I'm just trying, that's why I'm trying to ask this clarifying question. Is your point just that just because there are conceptual parallels between Kabbalah and modern theories in quantum physics, that Kabbalah is not like either the Copenhagen interpretation or many worlds or Bohmian or any other interpretation?
No.
Because unlike those interpretations of quantum physics, the Kabbalah
what we're
is
saying
not
is
experimentally supported.
the
No.
conceptual linkage isn't even there. You're grabbing onto
saying
random
it's not
numbers
like-
or random phrases and saying, look, here's a random phrase that shows up somewhere else. It must be a conceptual link. It's not there. This is pareidolia at best.
You're saying yes. So you're saying yes to my question. You're saying yes.
No, I'm not.
It is
What
wrong
I'm
to make
saying
these
is
parallels.
your question is nonsensical because it assumes the truthfulness of the premise behind it, which I've rejected.
Okay. That's not what
Right.
I said. What I'm
And-
saying,
and-
are you saying that it is? I don't think you understood my question.
Go ahead,
My
ask it again. We'll see if we can.
Okay, last time. What I was asking was, do you think it's wrong to make parallels between different interpretations being underdetermined in quantum physics, like the Bohmian interpretation, Copenhagen interpretation, many worlds interpretation, and Kabbalah? Because unlike Kabbalah, those other interpretations of quantum physics have actual empirical support for them that are tested both using mathematics and logic, and Kabbalah does not have empirical support for it, is not testable by mathematics and logic.
Yes, exactly. You're comparing apples to elephants. So let's just take these 10 emanations, right? What dimension we'll just assume it's the 10 for string theory, applies to crown? Is that time? Is that the 3 dimensions of space? Or is that one of the other dimensions that string theory requires? How do you get there? How do you get from divine crown, Keter, divine crown, to any one of the 10 dimensions in string theory?
So I don't.
Which one does that coincide
I don't know
to?
because I'm not a Kabbalist. But the thing is, these types of questions. So the way
Well, you
exactly
just
Terra
said
is
you're saying that the 10 emanations is the same as the 10 dimensions. And now I'm asking you to draw me the bridge, to build that bridge, right? Starting with, and you can take any of them. What is it? Crown, wisdom, understanding, mercy, justice, beauty, eternity, glory, foundation, and presence in the world. Okay, so which of those corresponds to the dimension of time?
I don't know. What I was saying was that
So if you don't know, then how are you making this how are you making this analogy? If you don't know, how do you make the analogy?
Let me answer it. Well, you're asking me a question, but you keep interrupting when I try to answer how I'm making the analogy, which is that I got the analogy between Kabbalah and quantum physics from 2 scholars. The first is Rabbi Yitzhak Ginsburg. That's Yitzhak, Y-A-T-C-Z-C-H-A-K, and last name Ginsburg. And then the other rabbi that I got this from was a man named Chaim Schipper. That's Chaim, C-H-A-I-M, S-C-H-I-P-P-E-R. If you want to know how they make these
do they
parallels,
answer the question? And do they answer the question? How do you get which of the 10 emanations corresponds is analogous to time, or the 3 dimensions of 3-dimensional space, X, Y, or Z, right? That's the question you've got to answer, and you can't answer that question. And do you see how you're still building nothing on top of nothing on top of nothing? Just a nothing burger all the way down.
I can't answer the question because I'm not an expert in Kabbalah. But if you would like an answer from someone who does know Kabbalah, you could email or send a comment.
Yeah,
or
You're the
whatever.
one
We're
we're
not gonna be
talking
doing
to.
any of
You're the
that.
one who's making the claim. You're the one that's making the claim, Hannah, not us. And if you can't answer these questions, then I would suggest you don't know enough, despite your years of studying this, according to, if I remember what you said correctly, and I may not. So what? You haven't done anything to prove your case.
I think you're learning about Judaism, but Kabbalah and quantum physics is something I'm relatively new to. This is just based off of some lectures I listened to and some articles I read. It's by no means my area of expertise. I'm just saying a lot of these specific details, like which of the 10 dimensions are correlated to Sephiroth or something like that, are better asked for a practicing Kabbalist than even someone who has spent years studying.
Hannah, just pause for a second because we're running short on time. I want to get to another caller before we run out of time. You've been calling into this show as long as last 3 or 4 years, correct?
No, I don't believe 3 or 4 years now.
I've seen you call into the show at least a dozen times, and every time you call in, you've got some brand new kind of way out there theory, and it never ends well. You've never come close to demonstrating the truthfulness of your claim. Why do you keep calling in thinking finally this will be the argument that does it?
Because I presume that if it's
who are you trying to convince?
Evidential case. I presume that if it's a convincing evidential case, like in this case, I was thinking that the parallels between quantum physics and Kabbalistic concepts would be a convincing evidential case that they'll convince either the host or the audience to re-examine their skepticism to God and to religion.
Based on what? Because you obviously didn't do enough research other than go, oh, look, this says 10 and this says 10, therefore the same thing. That's the extent of what you've given us. That's the extent of your thinking.
Well, I also gave you the Heisenberg. Uncertainty principle being correlated,
which has nothing to do with God.
But
is God a particle?
Which was actually even worse. That analogy was actually worse than your 10 things in physics and 10 things in Kabbalah. It was worse. It wasn't better. I don't want to talk about that because I don't want to embarrass you with that, because that just makes you sound even less able to critically think about things.
I understand, but here's the thing. If you object to analogies, have you considered asking practicing Orthodox Jewish Kabbalist or physicist who actually can make
not remotely interested? You can have them call in the show and then we'll talk to them, but we're not going to go out and search like your weird Jewish mysticism woo-woo and try to make parallels where they don't exist. We've already seen what it's done to you. We're not interested in that. But listen, Hannah, we appreciate you calling in again. We're going to get to the next caller. We've got very limited time left. So thank you for calling. And we'll see you again in a couple of weeks, I'm sure. Okay. I'll never understand why Hannah keeps calling. It never ends the way they're hoping. I don't know why they think that something new is going to happen this time. But anyways, we appreciate the phone call either way. Let's grab Benji from the queue. Benji's a theist and says that possibly the end of the world's happening soon. Let's see.
The end of the world as we know it, and I feel fine. There's a song about that by REM. It's actually a good tune.
It's a great song.
I like that song. I was sitting here listening, and is it okay if I change the subject to another topic, or do I need to stick with that one?
Well, maybe. I don't know. What's your next topic? I thought the end of the world was going to be interesting.
Well, I thought so too, but I don't really have any good arguments for it. I tried ahead. But
do you believe the world's ending?
If Jesus showed up in front of y'all, you still wouldn't worship him because you don't agree with the doctrine. And according to Christian doctrine,
that's not the reason I wouldn't worship him. I wouldn't worship him because I believe that no being is worthy of worship.
No, right. I understand there's a lot of reasons not to. I'm just trying to make a point real quick. According to
if Muhammad if Muhammad showed up to you, would you worship Muhammad? Would you become Muslim?
I would believe he exists. I would believe he exists.
Okay, great.
That's separate from
okay, just making sure that you're holding yourself to the same standard you're about to hold us to.
Yeah. No, I am. I was just making the point that in the Tristan doctrine, you have to worship Jesus to be an actual Christian. You can believe that Jesus
in spirit and truth.
If he appeared to you now, you would know he exists, but you still wouldn't be a Christian. And so I was wondering, a lot of the Christians that call in to try to convert y'all back to Christianity, if you was a Christian before or whatever religion you was, or denomination. I was wondering, is there really a point to that? Because at the end of the day, it's subjective. Like you can choose not to worship him, worship him.
The existence of a being is not subjective. The existence of a being is not subjective. It's objective. And that's what we're looking for, is objective evidence that your God exists.
I'm saying the worshiping is subjective, not the existence. Yeah, if he popped in front of you, you would know he exists. But it's still subjective on your part if you want to worship him or not. And so if you don't worship him according to Christian doctrine, you wouldn't be a true Christian, or that Christopson fallacy bullshit, whatever.
Yeah. The question isn't can you prove that we should worship your God? The question is, does your God exist? Those are two different questions. That's the point.
Right. Well, I was just giving a hypothetical. If you knew that he did exist, is where I was going with that. But also, are you familiar with the Terra fallacy? That any evidence, no matter how big it would be insufficient? Because I've heard some of you, and I'm not.
Yeah, it sounds like you've fallen into it. You just said that it would be insufficient for you to become Muslim.
Well, no. I said I wouldn't worship him. I didn't say I wouldn't believe in him.
I know.
I just wouldn't worship.
Well, belief and worship, obviously, we agree are two different things. But the reality is, like we have the same standard as you have, right? You're trying to accuse us of some kind of a bias, and it's not going to work, because any bias that you applied to us in Christianity, we're going to apply it to you and like every other religion on the planet.
Well, I don't think you're doing it, but I've watched videos where people say they don't know what would convince them.
Yeah, that may be true, but you're talking to two people right now that have their own opinions. You want to ask us what our opinions are?
Sure. What's your opinions?
I know what it would take to convince me.
Okay.
To be sure, you can say, I don't know, and that's a perfectly fair answer. I do know. If every prediction in the Hebrew Bible came true, I would be convinced that the God of the Hebrew Bible is true. Now, I would never be convinced of Christianity, because Christianity contradicts the Hebrew Bible, which is its source material, and you can't contradict your source material. So Christianity is dead in the water. That being said, if there was a book that made all kinds of predictions and every single one of them came true in the time frame that they were predicted, I would find that to be very compelling evidence. That doesn't mean it would be compelling evidence for everyone.
Right, because everyone is subjective and everyone is independent on what would convince them. I understand that.
Well, no, because for me, it would depend on the circumstances in which, so it depends on the circumstances that those prophecies were made. For instance, if the prophecy is that a temple will be built and people start working on building a temple, that to me is not fulfillment of a prophecy. It's just people building a temple, maybe because of the prophecy, but it doesn't necessarily mean anything. So it would depend on the circumstances. It would be sufficient good evidence. Now, what evidence is it? I don't know, because all the evidence I've seen so far has been horrifyingly bad. So if you're going to come up with evidence, it's going to have to be something better than what's already been presented on this show for the last nearly 30 years.
25, yeah. Yeah, I know it was over about 25 years, something like that. So as far as foretelling the future or stuff like that, the stuff that it says would have to be very specific and not subject to any other kind of ridicule, to where it's specifically talking about that one event and nothing else.
For prophecy, yes. Yeah, prophecy needs to be very specific.
Yeah, if it's generic, like something silly, like there's going to be wars. Yeah, we get that. There's always going to be wars. That's not a real prophecy.
Well, there's always going to be wars. I mean, there's always been wars, but
and a prophecy that the temple's going to appear and people start working on the temple, that doesn't work for me either.
Yeah. No, it doesn't work for me either. I wouldn't count that as a prophecy either. But
and I would say that
also,
failed prophecies are good evidence that something's not true.
What was that?
That failed prophecies are also good evidence that something is not true. Like we're talking about what it would take us to convince that it's true. Well, the reality is the universe is true. When the prophecies fail, we're obviously convinced that it's not true. That's why Christianity and Judaism are both dead in the water because of all the failed prophecies, in my opinion.
Well, the only other thing and the reason I brought up the Terra fallacy is because the Terra, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but the Terra fallacy is basically any evidence that would be presented to someone it would be insufficient to them. They would want more, something else basically and then it just adds on top of itself. And in science is always self-correcting itself. And so if you make a discovery, you put a hypothesis, and then you test the hypothesis, and you do multiple tests, and you have group testing and independent confirmation and that kind of thing. And with religion, you can't really do that because religion is set on the basis of here's what happened. You have to believe it. There's faiths, and even the definition in the Bible of faiths is evidence for stuff unseen, which obviously makes no sense.
Right. So why are you a theist?
I mean,
it says here you're a theist, and you're making perfectly good atheist arguments.
Yeah, I'm agnostic.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, listen, Benji, we appreciate you coming up and chat with us. Sad we didn't get to the end of the world, but that's okay. We've got one more caller in line, and we're kind of getting over our time limit here, so I'm going to get the next caller in.
Yeah.
But thanks for calling in, friend.
Before you go, can you tell me what time y'all start the Atheist Experience Central Time?
Central Time is 4:30.
Okay, thanks.
Sure. All right, we've got one theist or atheist left, and then we're going to read off our super chats. We've got a call from Jim in Missouri. He's been waiting here for an hour and 40 minutes. Asks, if there's an omniscient God, do we have free will? And I think this is a really good question. What do you think? What do you think, Jim? We have Jim talking to Jim now.
Yeah, well, I've done that before, but the reason I say that if God is omniscient, if God exists, do we actually have free will? Because he knows what we're going to do before we do it.
Well, the real question, so if it's just omniscience and none of the other two properties, then yes, we do. Just because God knows what we're thinking, and thinking is something that is a definite property. I mean, we have neuroscientists right now who can, simple thoughts, not super complex ones, seconds before that thought becomes conscious. So that's something that is knowable. So if it's just omniscience, then yes, we still have free will. If it's omnipotence with omniscience, that becomes a little bit more difficult because God would know our states of mind and how the neurons are going to fire in such a way that we're going to make a decision. And he has the power to change the universe in such a way that we'll make a different decision. So once you start adding that omnipotence in, yes, you can make the question, do we really have free will? Because God can change the universe in ways that will cause us to make a different decision. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and that's kind of what my point was. If he's omniscient, omnipotent, all the other omnis, then, would we actually have free will? One time I like to compare like the story of Job to the 1919 World Series. All the gamblers, they were betting on the Cincinnati Reds to win because they knew that the Chicago White Sox were going to take a dive. So why wouldn't they bet on the Reds?
Well, it's a little more subtle than that because God's setting up the universe in such a way for us to make the decisions he wants us to make. And that's what would take away free will. If God chooses not to make to change the universe, and we would still have free will. So it's a little more subtle than everybody thinking that the White Sox are going to take a dive.
Well, I'm just saying. I mean, to me, if I knew that somebody was going to make a bad decision and they weren't going to believe in me, and I love them so much, to me it's like, here's an idea. I don't create that person. I just say, okay, he never exists.
Well, no, you would actually set it up so that person would believe, right? Because you would know what it would take for that person to believe, and you would provide that evidence.
I could do that too, or again, I could just say, yeah, they've got free will. They can disobey me. I just know that they won't.
Right. Because I've created the universe in such a way that my existence and belief in me and worshiping me is so obviously the right thing to do that nobody can deny it. Yeah. And he didn't create that universe. So where are we? Right.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I don't believe it in all of it anyway. So, I'm
right.
just throwing out an interesting question of, there's only one way we can really have free will, and that's God can't be omniscient.
Well, he can't be omniscient and omnipotent.
Right. As I've told believers, he can't be if he exists, he can't be all three. He can't be omniscient, omnipotent, and omnibenevolent.
Benevolent. Right. Well, he can't be omnibenevolent if evil exists in the world, right? And the other two. Because he could be omnibenevolent and have no power to change the world, and that would still be okay. He could be omnibenevolent and omniscient, and that would still fit. But he couldn't be all three at the same time. You can't have all 3 points of the triangle. It just doesn't work that way. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean.
And of course, they will point to free will, but that means every time a Christian points to free will and saying, well, God allows free will, and that's where evil comes from, then you're limiting God's power to directly violating free will. And we know he's willing to do that because he did that to Pharaoh's heart, right?
Yeah. Well, to me, that also says maybe he's a sadist.
Then he's not omnibenevolent, unless, of course, it's their kink, in which case
right.
We don't kink shame around here, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, again, going back to Pharaoh, it's like there were points Pharaoh was even saying, look, I give, uncle, you guys can leave.
Mm-hmm. And God hardened his heart, yeah.
No, I'm not done with you yet.
Right.
Like, I'm not done showing you how powerful I am.
I got to show off by killing all these children.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And there's the whole talking donkey incident.
Well, not only that, with Pharaoh, it's like if he knew that was the one he that would do it, it's like, why didn't he just lead with that?
Right.
Like,
well,
why did we have to have all the other however many plagues there?
All fun stuff.
Mm-hmm.
All fun stuff to have while drinking a glass of wine or 5.
Yeah.
Or a beer, or the beverage of your choice, adult or otherwise.
Oh yes. Well, mine's beer, so hey.
Yeah. Either way, I like a good beer too.
Jim, thank you for calling in, and thank you for waiting on the line. And we really appreciate the question. And we got to wrap up the show, but we'll be live again same time next week, okay?
All righty. Well, I hope to talk to you guys then.
All right.
All right. Cheers. Have a good one. Fair enough question. I remember going through the cycle on this particular question a number of times before I arrived at the same conclusion that you're at, which is you can know all things and still not have like a predetermination. Predetermination requires a couple other things, namely being the creator of all things. Mm-hmm. But with that, let's read some super chats and we'll close out the show. Do you have access to the super chats or just me?
Just you, I think.
Okay, I'm going to read through our super chats. We've got a $10 super chat from our friend Daisy. Says, if Christians read the Bible to get closer to God, what do atheists read to solidify their non-belief? Like, what are the atheist Bibles?
There aren't any, really. I mean, not in the same way that the Christians have a Bible, I don't think. You can read science books and realize that God's not necessary for anything. You can read philosophy on epistemology or philosophy of religion. You Yeah.
I think,
what did you read?
From the Bible.
I was going to leave that one for you just because.
Yeah, I mean, listen, if you want to know about how God is ridiculous, read the holy books, man. They're full of crazy stuff. And it's not just Christianity. Like all the holy books got some nonsense in it. That's how I deconstructed. But there are great secular authors out there. I would certainly, recommend like the Four Horsemen, and then read scholarship. Scholarship is surprisingly pretty honest in the world of like biblical studies and even Quranic studies. We've got a $19.99 super chat from our friend Zen. Thank you so much, Zen. Zen says, "Hi, Justin. I've given up trying to follow you when you're not cooking at home. Always happy to learn from you wherever you are. The aroma of Christians is just as pleasing on the other grills. Rock hard for Doug." Well, thank you, Zen. I appreciate it. I'm sorry, I'm bouncing around, especially on Sundays. On Sundays, I'm really no longer streaming on my own channel at this point. I'm just streaming on friends' channels and unapologetic. So, hey, thanks for following me. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And D. Frederick, thank you for the $9.99, says, does atheistic evolution contemplate a God who planned out the genetic changes or the environmental changes driving selection? That's a fair point. What do you think, Jim?
Well, so if evolution is theistic or evidence of a God, which I don't think it is, then yeah, he would. I mean, again, we go back to that omnipotent God thing. God created the universe in such a way that this is exactly what he wants, evil and all, which means he can't be all three. So I don't know how theistic evolution would actually work, because it would depend on the God definition that you use.
Right. And I think my friend Ian was the one who turned me on to this idea that if there is theistic evolution, what a weird deity to use the most carnage, barbarian way possible to go from the beginning of species to today, like just
completely
one
random.
carnage after. Yeah, there's so much just kind of like a kick it off the cliff and see what happens type of situation over here. Like what are we doing? If that's the best that the God can do, I'm not impressed. I'm not even convinced that this God knows what's going on, or gods, maybe plural. Gretchen Z, thank you for the $3.11 super chat, says, absence makes the church grow fondlers. Oof.
Oh, that hurts because it's true.
It's true. That was good. That was good. I appreciate the joke. Gretchen, I love a good joke, and we obviously appreciate that here. Sir Jake, I hope I said that right. Thank you for the $5 super chat. Says, the Kabbalah masters sadly all passed in the Shoah. Folks claiming to understand Kabbalah are selling you a crock of BS. No one would say it's quantum. Yeah, I've actually met some people who are legitimately into the Kabbalah, and I've never heard this argument before. I'm not convinced that Hannah is, at least for a long time, part of the Kabbalah movement or a Noahide Jew. I was really sure in earlier calls, Hannah was a generic theist, at one point a deist, and at one point even made arguments for Christianity. Maybe I'm misremembering.
Oh,
I could be
her
misremembering.
ability, her critical thinking skills are definitely in question. So, and her curiosity is also in question, right? She's not asking basic questions. So,
right. But, word salad, right?
Yeah.
Daisy, thank you for our $10 super chat. Big W Daisy. Daisy says, Justin massively helped me deconstruct from my belief in ghosts. It was false memories and priming. That's why these shows are important. False beliefs influence what we go through in reality. So true, Daisy. Because when we experience the world, we filter them through our belief systems, right? We automatically are categorizing things that are either plausible or implausible based on past experience, right? But if we have in our head past experiences that are false, like belief in ghosts, belief in deities and things like that, when we see stuff moving forward, we're likely to categorize stuff moving forward in those same categories when they don't really exist. Once we get rid of those categories, it's funny how quickly our mind looks at that stuff and says, oh, that's just the wind's blowing the tree and it's hitting my house. No, there's no ghost out there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we're pattern recognition machines. And once you establish a pattern, we'll recognize that pattern to be, any pattern that fits that we'll categorize it. And so once you get rid of the patterns, and it's not always easy to get rid of the patterns. So.
Right. Absolutely. Well, Jim, I had a blast today. Thank you so much for sharing the screen with me again. And also, we need to say a big thank you to our backup, Jimmy. So we've had 3 Jims today.
Well, I'm Jimmy Jr. Jim's. Hi, Dad. I thought it was a great show. Thanks for bringing me up. I wanted to say a couple things. Mary Kate on maintaining relationships with family. So just remember, and this is a hard reality that many people I don't think understand, we're born into family. We have no choice who our family is. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you just got to draw a line. And when they cross that line, say goodbye. That's not easy, but it's always an option. A lot of people don't recognize that. And then, that brings me up to caller 2, religious people. And I don't believe that this person meant this maliciously, but just saying religious people cling to belief for no good reason. I think what a better way to say that would be with no evidence or maybe no proof, because sometimes they might actually have a good reason. Maybe they need those family relationships for their own survival. There are a lot of people who are in Muslim countries that may not believe that it would not be a good thing for them to just come clean and say, I'm an atheist. That is a good reason to not voice your opinion openly. Okay. Mm-hmm. Also, you guys were, I don't know who's mentioned, I think Jim, you mentioned somebody checking out a historian on the Dead Sea Scrolls. I just want to throw out Dr.
Kip Davis.
Well, who is that again? I'm sorry.
Dr. Kip Davis.
Okay. Well, I want to throw out somebody who I like reading up on and listening to. That's Dr. Jody Magnus, an ancient history scholar and archaeologist. If anybody wants to check her out, go ahead. Hannah, look, I couldn't have spoken intelligently to physics or the Kabbalah, but calling the show and telling the hosts that if they wanted to know an answer, they should email experts. I could have challenged you on that one for sure. I don't know why you would call and say that. And then, Gretchen, that super chat that you just dropped. Oh, that made me cringe. Good job. Guys, thank you so much for having me up, and have a wonderful night.
Jim, we really love and appreciate you, and I'm sure we'll see you again very soon. And with that, friends, that is the show for today. Thank you so much for being here. Remember, if you're not already following the channel, follow the channel. There's lots of other shows besides this that you can catch. And also, let's see, 4:30 Central Time next week, same place. If you're in the Eastern Time Zone, 5:30.
Watch Talk Heathen live Sundays at 1 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/YTTH and call into the show at 512-991-9242 or connect to the show online at tiny.cc/callth.